My name is Vicky S. Flaherty, and I am 26 years old. I evicted my own parents from the house I legally owned, and I sold it for a $300,000 profit. But this part of the story starts when I was 19. Back then, I lived with my parents, Ronald and Cassandra, my older sister Bianca, and my younger brother Aiden. I worked part-time doing small electrical jobs and whatever handyman work the neighbors needed. In my house, though, none of that counted. I was already the girl who fixed anything that broke, picked up after everyone, and ran errands without being asked. Bianca graduated college that year. The degree wasn't useful, but you wouldn't know that from the celebration. Cassandra rented a whole banquet hall, hired a photographer, ordered a giant cake, and decorated the place like Bianca had just won an award for saving the country. I didn't even get to sit with the family. I spent half the day adjusting lights, moving tables, and taking photos. Because you're good with cameras, Vicky. You know how these things work. Bianca walked around in a dress she didn't buy, shaking hands and smiling like the whole world was waiting for her to take over. Ronald kept introducing her as our future leader and telling everyone she was destined for success. I carried trays, cleaned spills, and ran to the store twice because Cassandra wanted different napkins. I didn't complain. At that age, I still believed helping was normal. The party cost around $5,000. Cassandra bragged about it to anyone who would listen. I remember standing near the back wall holding the camera strap, watching Bianca get another round of applause for a degree she barely scraped through. Cassandra hugged her again, telling her how proud she was. No one even said my name the entire night unless they needed something moved. 2 months later, Aiden graduated high school. The celebration wasn't as massive, but it still looked like a commercial. Ronald bought him a used car with a giant bow on top, and Cassandra filled the backyard with decorations and catered food. Aiden sat in the center like some celebrity, while people handed him envelopes and gifts. He didn't even look at half of them. I parked the car they bought him because he didn't know how to handle the driveway's curve. The car didn't last either. It was always having problems, and somehow that became another reason I was expected to drive him everywhere. That same weekend, I graduated too, a year later than I was supposed to. Between working, getting dragged into family responsibilities, and missing credits, I ended up finishing late. We had dinner at a small diner near home because we were tight on money after everything for Bianca and Aiden. Ronald ordered the cheapest items on the menu and reminded me halfway through my fries that I needed to start thinking ahead since I wasn't going to college like Bianca. Cassandra said she believed in me, but she said it the way people talk about someone who needs to be managed. After that, my role became more obvious. If the sink leaked, I fixed it. If something electrical flickered, they yelled my name before trying a switch. Every tax season, Ronald pushed a stack of papers toward me because I was better with numbers. The lawn was my responsibility from age 14 onward, even though Bianca was older and perfectly capable of pushing a mower. Even when Aiden's car was running, he refused to drive himself anywhere unless it was to pick up his friends. So I became his chauffeur. Bianca left messes everywhere. Plates, clothes, half-finished projects, and somehow they all ended up in my hands. Cassandra would say, "Just help your sister, she's stressed." Or, "Bianca has a lot on her mind right now." Even though Bianca barely lifted a finger in the house, Ronald didn't say much. If anything, he acted like this was expected, like my role had been assigned before I was born. I never heard a thank you, but I heard plenty of instructions. One afternoon, while fixing a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen, I overheard Cassandra talking to her sister in the living room. They thought I couldn't hear. "Oh, we don't worry about Vicky. She's like a rock. You pile anything on her and she stays put. But Bianca needs guidance. She's sensitive." I sat there holding a screwdriver, staring at the cabinet door. That was the first time it clicked in a way I couldn't ignore. They didn't see me as a person with needs or limits. I was a tool, a backup generator, the thing that keeps running no matter how much you drain it. And that realization didn't make me angry. It made me quiet. After high school, I went straight into trade work. I picked electrical because I already understood most of it from fixing everything at home. By the time I was 21, I was making steady, decent money, long days, early mornings, but it felt good to have something that was mine. I paid for my tools, my truck, my own clothes. No one bought me anything. That part never bothered me. What did bother me was how fast my income became everybody else's problem but mine. It started small. Ronald would come into my room holding the electric bill like it was a court summons. "We're short this month. Can you take care of it?" He said it like I was already supposed to know the answer. Cassandra followed a few days later with a grocery list and the same tone. "Groceries are crazy expensive right now. Can you spot us until next week?" I didn't argue. I worked full-time. They didn't. I figured helping was normal. Then Bianca's car insurance came up. She hadn't kept a job longer than 2 months since graduation, but she acted like the world owed her patience. Cassandra slid the bill across the kitchen table toward me. Bianca's looking for new work. She just needs a little support right now. Bianca didn't even look up from her phone. She just said, "I'll pay you back once I'm settled," which meant never. Then Aiden announced he wanted to go on a wellness retreat, something about stress and needing to heal his energy. Ronald looked straight at me when he brought it up like the funding had already been approved. They didn't even pretend it was optional. Cassandra kept saying it was important for Aiden's mental state, even though Aiden spent most days on his bed scrolling through his phone. Anytime I tried to save money for myself, something came up at home. A pipe burst, a tire went flat, or someone had unexpected expenses. Funny how none of those emergencies happened unless I had a little extra saved. I'd just get ahead and suddenly Cassandra would show up with a bill. Ronald would hint about overdue payments, or Bianca would mention her card was declined again. It wasn't luck. It was a pattern. I didn't need a therapist to explain it. Around that time, I met Daniel Mercer. He was a man who looked people in the eyes when they spoke, like he was actually listening instead of waiting for his turn to talk. We met because I was on a job fixing a panel at a small commercial building, and he was there managing the property. He offered me water, asked my name, and then asked something no one in my house ever asked me. "Are you okay?" It should have been a simple question. It hit me anyway. Daniel became my boyfriend, and the first thing I noticed was how quiet my body felt around him. Not because life was easy, but because I didn't have to brace for the next demand. The first time he came by my parents' house to pick me up, Cassandra smiled too wide. Ronald tried to sound impressive. Bianca didn't bother to stand up. Aiden stared at his phone and made a face like my life was inconveniencing his. Daniel watched it all without commenting, but later in the car he said, "They talk to you like your staff." I laughed like it was nothing. I had learned to laugh like that to survive, but I still stared out the window for the rest of the ride because hearing it out loud made it real. 1 month, the roof started leaking after a storm. Ronald said they'd call someone eventually, but they didn't call anyone. They waited until the ceiling stain spread, then turned to me. "You should handle it," Ronald said. "You know this stuff." I didn't know roofing, but I figured it out. I climbed up there, tore off damaged shingles, replaced plywood, fixed the flashing, and sealed everything. Then I bought all the materials myself because Ronald and Cassandra weren't sure when they'd be able to pay me back. They never paid me back. Around this time, Bianca started dating Ethan Cole. Ethan was charming in a way that made Cassandra instantly soften like she was meeting someone important. Cassandra treated him like royalty from the first night. "He's perfect for Bianca," she kept saying. "She deserves someone who makes life easier." It wasn't subtle. It was one of those comments meant to make me feel like I wasn't pulling my weight, despite the fact I was the only one paying for anything. Ethan didn't really talk to me. He treated me like background furniture, polite enough to not look rude, distant enough to make it clear I didn't matter. Bianca acted proud, like landing him was an achievement. Cassandra practically glowed every time Ethan came over, offering him drinks, food, anything he wanted. I was in the garage rewiring a broken outlet Ronald had overloaded again. Daniel noticed the change in my eyes before I admitted there was a change. He started asking me questions I didn't know how to answer without feeling disloyal. "Do they ever ask what you need? Do they ever say thank you? Do you ever get to rest?" I kept telling him, "It's just family." And he kept replying, calm and steady, "Family isn't supposed to cost you your life." One night, I sat down and added everything up. Electric bills, grocery runs, random repairs, car insurance, Aiden's retreat, roof materials, gas money, and all the small things they treated as my responsibility. It came out to just under $30,000. $30,000 into a house I didn't own, for people who didn't thank me, didn't ask politely, and didn't care if I had my own life. I stared at the number for a long time. No anger, no panic, just clarity. The next morning, I packed a small bag, 2 pairs of work pants, a few shirts, my boots, and my basic tools. I didn't slam doors or announce anything. I didn't yell or throw guilt back at them. I just walked out the door and drove away. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I wasn't staying there another day. When I left, I drove until the state lines changed twice. I didn't plan anything besides distance. I found a cheap month-to-month rental in a quiet town and set up a P.O. box so my parents wouldn't know my actual address. I didn't cut contact completely, but I kept it low enough that they couldn't drag me back into anything. I found steady work fast. Tradespeople were in high demand, and I wasn't picky. If it paid, I took it. Electrical jobs, small renovations, commercial repairs, anything. Within a year. I wasn't just working jobs, I was running them. I picked up extra certifications, bought better tools, and worked every hour someone would pay me for. Some weeks I hit 80 hours without noticing. It didn't bother me. I was finally working for myself and no one else. Daniel visited whenever he could. We weren't living together, but he was there in ways that counted. He helped me paint one of my first properties at midnight while we ate takeout on the floor. He never once asked me to send money back home. He never once suggested I owed anyone anything. Once I had enough saved, I bought a rundown property on the edge of town. It looked terrible from the street, overgrown yard, cracked driveway, peeling siding, but the bones were solid. I spent months renovating it after work, doing everything myself, rewiring, flooring, drywall, roofing. By the time I finished, it looked like a completely different house. I sold it for a good profit and bought another one. That became my pattern. Work, renovate, sell, repeat. The money came slow at first, then faster. I built a routine that didn't depend on anyone. Every dollar I earned stayed with me. Every hour I worked made my life better instead of holding someone else's up. The quiet in my new house felt strange at first. No shouting, no guilt speeches, no sudden emergencies that magically appeared when I had savings. It didn't take long to get used to it. Holidays were the only time I heard from them. Ronald called that first Thanksgiving pretending to check in, but it turned into a guilt speech. Families don't abandon each other, he said, even though that's exactly what they had been doing to me for years. Cassandra tried a softer angle on Christmas. She said I was drifting from the family and that Bianca missed me. I knew that wasn't true because Bianca never called once. Aiden called a few times that first year, mostly to complain. He said he dropped out of college because it was too rigid and was now studying spiritual healing. Then he asked why I didn't come home to help him with money or transportation. I ignored those requests. Eventually, the pattern became predictable. I'd answer one call every couple of months just to keep the peace. Ronald would mention something about bills. Cassandra would sigh loudly in the background. Aiden would talk about energy crystals or meditation. Bianca's updates always came through Cassandra. She wasn't working again. Ethan had left. Something about commitment issues. Something about her needing space. There were whispers about his ex-girlfriend, Clover Hayes, still circling him back then. But Bianca insisted she didn't care. 5 years went by like that. Working, saving, renovating, no chaos, no tension. I finally had a stable business. I had employees. I had actual days where I didn't think about anybody back home. Daniel started talking about the future in a way that didn't scare me. Not pressure, just possibility. You've built something real, he told me once. You don't have to go back to what hurt you. I believed him. Then the call came. I saw Ronald's name pop up on my phone late on a Wednesday night. I almost let it ring out, but something told me to answer. When I picked up, he wasn't calm or composed. He was crying so hard he could barely get words out. Vicky, we're in trouble. We're going to lose the house. I didn't say anything for a moment. He kept talking fast, voice breaking. According to him, they'd fallen behind on mortgage payments for months. The bank had already sent notices. Foreclosure was in progress. They had 6 weeks before the sheriff posted the final eviction. I heard Cassandra in the background sobbing loudly and saying, "Call her again. Tell her we need her." Ronald tried to steady his voice. "Vicky, please, you have to come home. We need you. The family needs you. Be a good daughter." There it was. The phrase that always came out when they wanted something. Be a good daughter. I didn't agree to anything on the spot, but the call made one thing clear. The life I built was stable. Their lives were collapsing. And once again, they expected me to fix everything. 3 days later, I drove back. Not as their daughter, as their solution. I drove back to my parents' house 3 days after Ronald's call. I didn't abandon my business to do it. By that point, I had a foreman I trusted, and my crew could run jobs without me hovering over them. I handed off the schedule, stayed available by phone, and took what I told Daniel was a temporary leave. He didn't argue. He just said, "Remember who you are when you walk back in there." The street looked smaller than I remembered. The house looked worse. When I walked inside, Cassandra rushed me immediately, crying loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She grabbed my arm like she expected me to collapse into her. Ronald hovered behind her, wringing his hands. Aiden stood near the hallway, staring at his phone, pausing only long enough to say, "Finally." Bianca wasn't there that afternoon. Apparently she was out with friends because even foreclosure didn't interrupt her schedule. I didn't hug anyone. I didn't comment on the mess. I just said, "Where's the paperwork from the bank?" That set the tone. No warmth, no reunion, just business. Ronald led me to the dining table, which was covered in unopened mail, final notices, warnings, letters from the bank, everything they should have dealt with months ago. I skimmed through the stack. They weren't lying. 6 weeks was the maximum estimate. Cassandra kept saying, "We're losing everything, Vicky. Everything. Your childhood home." She said it like I hadn't been the one holding the place together half my life. I sat down, put the papers in order, and said the sentence that changed the direction of the day. "I'll pay the arrears, and I'll pay the mortgage off in full." Ronald's shoulders dropped in relief. Cassandra gasped like I had just performed a miracle. Then I finished the sentence. "But I'm not giving away that kind of money for free." Cassandra froze. Ronald blinked at me like he didn't understand the words. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "if I save this house, I become the owner. Fully, legally, no arguments later." Cassandra's voice shot up immediately. "Vicky, how can you even say that? This is our home. You can't just steal it." I didn't respond to the accusation. I opened my folder and placed a set of documents on the table. A quitclaim deed to transfer title, a purchase agreement showing I was paying off the loan, my lawyer's card. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push. I just slid the papers forward. "You brought a lawyer?" Cassandra snapped. "You think we're strangers? We're your parents." Ronald backed her up. "This is disrespectful, Vicky, treating family like a transaction." Aiden rolled his eyes. "This is manipulative. You planned this." Bianca walked in halfway through the argument, took one look at the papers, and laughed softly. "You're unbelievable. You think owning paper makes you powerful?" I ignored the outbursts. "It's simple," I said. "You want the house saved? I'm willing to save it. But I'm not giving the bank 6 figures just to watch everyone mismanage it again. If I pay for it, I own it. The bank still has a lien. This only works one way. I pay the loan off in full at closing, and the deed transfers to me the same day." Cassandra covered her face and started crying harder, talking about betrayal and how she didn't raise me to be like this. Ronald went into a speech about loyalty and duty. Bianca accused me of trying to humiliate them. Aiden muttered something about karma. What they didn't do was argue the numbers. They didn't deny the foreclosure. They didn't offer another solution. They just attacked the idea of me having control. That told me everything. Eventually, Ronald ran out of speeches. Cassandra ran out of tears. Bianca crossed her arms and stared at me like she was waiting for me to break. Aiden disappeared back into his room. They didn't want to sign, but they didn't have another option. Bianca wasn't earning anything steady. Aiden avoided responsibility like it was a sport. Ronald and Cassandra had no savings, so they signed. My lawyer also had them sign a basic month-to-month lease after the transfer, rules in writing, no confusion later. Cassandra cried through the entire thing. Ronald looked defeated. Bianca muttered that this wouldn't last. I didn't react. Once the signatures were on paper, I gathered the documents, called my lawyer, and said, "It's done." When the legal parts was handled, I went to inspect the house. It was worse than I expected. The living room had stains in the carpet, big enough to outline a small animal. Crayon drawings covered the hallway walls. Aiden's friends, obviously. A corner of the ceiling had water damage from the leak I fixed years ago, only worse now. I checked the bathrooms. Mold. Black patches spreading behind the toilet and along the tiles. The bathtub drain was clogged with something I didn't want to identify. Bianca's old room was a disaster. Piles of clothes, broken jewelry, empty cups, half-burned candles. The entire place smelled like neglect. I stood in the hallway and looked at everything with one thought running through my head. This wasn't a home. This was a sinking ship patched with duct tape and excuses. But now it was my sinking ship. I spent the rest of the day taking photos, writing notes, planning. The renovation wouldn't be small. It wouldn't be cheap. It wouldn't be quick. But it would be mine. 6 figures at minimum, months of work, most of it done by me. And unlike every project in my childhood, none of these repairs were optional. The house was falling apart. They let it happen. Now I would rebuild it, not for them, for ownership, for control, for a future that wasn't chained to chaos. And they still didn't understand what that meant. Once the paperwork finalized and the mortgage was paid off, I started the renovation immediately. I treated it like a full-scale job site. No shortcuts, no patchwork, no pretending something minor would fix something major. The house needed more than repairs. It needed rebuilding from the inside out. The first 2 weeks were demolition. I ripped up old carpet, removed rotten baseboards, and tore out the sagging kitchen cabinets. Underneath everything was water damage, mold patches, and cheap fixes Ronald had done years earlier that barely held anything together. I worked from sunrise to sundown. No one offered to help. Bianca didn't lift a finger. Most mornings she was already on the couch scrolling through her phone by the time I started hauling debris to the dumpster. Aiden complained about the noise whenever I used power tools. Cassandra hovered nearby, giving suggestions. Ronald stood with his arms crossed like he was supervising a project he had funded. When I replaced the roof, Ronald said, "I would have done that years ago, just needed the right timing." When I installed the new HVAC system, Cassandra said, "Make sure you leave room in the kitchen for an island, but not too big. Bianca needs space to move around." They spoke like the house still revolved around Bianca's comfort. Once the structure stabilized, I started on the interior. New floors throughout the house. Thick planks, clean lines, nothing cheap. The difference was immediate. The place looked lighter already. Bianca followed me room to room like she had creative control. "This wall should be a soft blue. The living room needs more seating. You should add shelving here." She said everything confidently, like she owned the deed. I reminded her once, calmly, "I'm rebuilding this place. Please don't touch the tools." She rolled her eyes. The biggest project was the master suite. I built it entirely for myself. High-quality insulation, reinforced door, secure lock. Not huge, but clean, quiet, and completely under my control. It was the only room in the house no one else was allowed in. I posted one rule during the renovation: keep the common areas clean. That was it. They ignored it immediately. Bianca left cups and wrappers wherever she sat. Aiden spread crystals and notebooks across tables. Cassandra treated the kitchen like a drop zone. Ronald stacked papers in piles that never moved. Instead of helping, they acted like supervisors. "Don't put the island there. Bianca needs more pantry space. Aiden needs a meditation corner by the window." None of them asked what I wanted. One afternoon, I walked in from the hardware store and overheard Bianca talking to Aiden. "Vicky only owns the house on paper," she said casually. "Mom and Dad won't let her do anything big. She's too soft to kick anyone out." Aiden laughed. "She acts tough, but she won't move us. She's not built like that." They said it like I wasn't even there. I stood in the hallway listening. They didn't lower their voices. They assumed I wouldn't do anything. I didn't confront them. I didn't correct them. I just kept working. I poured close to $200,000 into a house everyone treated like a vacation rental, and every day their entitlement grew louder. Then Clover Hayes showed up again. She'd once been Ethan's ex-girlfriend before Bianca dated him. Now she was pregnant, recently separated from another boyfriend, and suddenly very present in our house. Cassandra welcomed her like royalty. "She'll just stay until the baby comes," Cassandra announced, patting Clover's arm like she was protecting something sacred. Clover didn't wait for permission. She walked straight inside, dropped her bags in the hallway, and made herself at home. From the moment she settled in, she acted like the house belonged to her. She walked through rooms slowly, studying everything I had built. "The master suite is way too big for one person," she said one morning while I measured cabinets. "You should move your stuff to the basement. It makes more sense for a family to have that space." She said it calmly, like she was discussing the weather. I didn't answer. I just kept writing measurements. "The baby needs room," she added. "You'll be fine downstairs." Later that afternoon, Ronald pulled me aside. "Don't be selfish," he said. "She's pregnant. She needs comfort." Cassandra nodded beside him. "You're young. You don't need that much space." It was interesting hearing them talk about space as if they had paid for any of it. The pressure escalated in small ways. My tools started disappearing. I would find them outside, in Bianca's room, shoved into random drawers. Clover claimed she borrowed them for projects she never described. Groceries didn't last 2 days anymore. I would fill the fridge in the morning, and by night half of it was gone. Bianca ate whatever she wanted without asking. Clover blamed pregnancy cravings. Aiden said he needed clean energy food. Laundry wasn't safe either. If I left clothes in the washer, Aiden would pull them out mid-cycle to wash his things. He'd leave my clothes on the floor and act like I should have timed it better. Every day felt tighter, smaller. No matter what I did, someone stepped over my boundaries. But the one line I never allowed them to cross was the master suite. That room was mine. I built it. I paid for it. I designed it to stay untouched. No one was allowed inside. One night after a 14-hour shift on a commercial job site, I came home exhausted. My hands were sore. My clothes were covered in dust. All I wanted was a shower and sleep. As I walked down the hallway, I heard laughter from inside my suite. Relaxed laughter, comfortable, settled. Clover's voice, Bianca's voice, the television playing loudly. I stopped. I tried my key. It didn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. They had changed the lock. The hardware was scratched. The frame had fresh marks. They hadn't even done it carefully. My hand stayed on this doorknob while the noise continued inside. Clover talking about paint colors. Bianca joking about claiming the bigger closet. Cassandra appeared behind me like she had been waiting. "Don't make this dramatic," she said. "It's still our house. Clover needs the space. You'll understand when you're a mother." Ronald stepped into the hallway and nodded. Aiden stood at the end, smirking like he had predicted this outcome. None of them looked ashamed. None of them looked concerned. They acted like locking me out of my own room was normal. I didn't argue. Arguing would only feed their belief that the house still belonged to them. Something inside me shifted quietly. Not anger, not heartbreak. Clarity. I walked back down the hall without saying a word. And that silence wasn't exhaustion. It was decision. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my truck with the engine idling, staring through the windshield while the house behind me glowed with lights I had installed. I eventually went back inside only long enough to grab clean clothes and shower in the downstairs bathroom. When I walked toward the master suite again, I wasn't hoping for an apology. I just wanted confirmation. Everything that had been inside my suite was dumped into the hallway. My work clothes were scattered across the carpet. My toolbox was open, sockets missing. My computer tower had a dent along the side panel. My safe, heavy enough that no one should have touched it, was dragged out and sitting crooked against the wall, scratched across the top. I stood there looking at the mess, and I realized something important. There was no shock left in me. The master suite door opened. Bianca walked out wearing my robe, holding my mug, stretching like she had slept perfectly. Clover followed behind her, already rearranging furniture inside the room like she was nesting. "Relax," Bianca said. "Mom and Dad said it's their house. The couch won't kill you." She said it like she was offering advice, like I was the unreasonable one. I didn't respond. I stepped around my scattered belongings, walked into what used to be my old bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag, and packed only what mattered. Clothes, documents, essentials. Before leaving, I took photos. Every damaged item, every displaced object, the scratched lock, the hardware, the hallway. Not for emotion. For evidence. Ronald called after me as I walked out. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I drove straight to a hotel across town and paid for a week up front. Then I called my lawyer. I explained everything. The lock change, the property damage, the takeover of the master suite, the lease violation. He didn't hesitate. "We move forward immediately," he said. "You have full ownership and a signed lease agreement. They've breached it." For the first time in years, something felt simple. 2 days later, the paperwork started moving. I returned to the house on a Thursday evening with everything my lawyer could file quickly. Not the eviction itself yet, but the first step that made it inevitable. Through the window, I saw them at the dinner table laughing like nothing had happened. Cassandra pouring drinks, Ronald carving food, Bianca talking loudly, Clover eating like she owned the kitchen, Aiden scrolling his phone. I walked in without knocking. The room went quiet, not from guilt, but from surprise. Cassandra forced a smile. "Vicky, sweetheart, grab a plate." I placed an envelope in front of Ronald and Cassandra. Notice of termination. Ronald skimmed it, then slammed it down. "You're evicting your own parents? Are you insane?" Before the shouting could build, I placed more papers on the table. One in front of Bianca, one in front of Clover, one in front of Aiden. Notices to vacate, unauthorized occupancy. Bianca stood so fast her chair scraped. "You're joking." Clover's face tightened. "I'm pregnant. You can't do this." Aiden snapped. "You have no soul." Cassandra started repeating the same line she always used when she wanted control back. "This is our home, our home." I stayed calm. "You changed my lock. You dumped my property in the hallway. You damaged my belongings. You violated the lease. This isn't a debate, it's notice." Ronald's face turned red. "We're not leaving." I didn't raise my voice. "Then you'll explain that to a judge." I walked out while the yelling followed me to the driveway. They didn't leave. Of course they didn't. They treated the papers like a tantrum, something they could ignore until I softened. So my lawyer filed formally. There was a court date, then another step, then the hearing. They showed up in court acting offended, like the entire thing was a misunderstanding over a bedroom. Cassandra cried. Ronald spoke about sacrifice. Bianca said I was being dramatic. Clover mentioned her pregnancy repeatedly. Aiden rolled his eyes at everything. The judge didn't respond to emotion. He looked at the deed, the signed lease, the photos, the documented lock change, the property damage, and it became simple. Judgment granted, writ issued, set-out day scheduled. The sheriff arrived exactly on time. Not dramatic, not threatening, just procedural. He posted the notice and explained the timeline. Inside the house, chaos erupted instantly. Cassandra cried loudly enough for neighbors to gather. Ronald argued like volume could rewrite paperwork. Bianca packed electronics first. Clover paced the yard on the phone, telling anyone who would listen that I had ruined her life. Aiden stuffed crystals and journals into trash bags while complaining about negative energy. I stood by my truck, not gloating, not angry, just watching the process finish. Bianca eventually came out to me crying for real now. "Please," she said, voice breaking. "Mom and Dad are basically homeless. Clover's pregnant. We have nowhere to go. You can't do this." I looked at her and felt nothing sharp anymore. "Just finished. Try getting a job," I said quietly. The sheriff completed his part. The locks were changed. The house was silent. For the first time in my life, the silence belonged to me. After they were gone, I walked back inside alone. The house felt different without their noise. Not empty, clear. There were still scuff marks along the hallway where my safe had been dragged. There were dents in the door frame from when they forced the lock. There were crumbs under the dining table and fingerprints on the new paint. I didn't rush to fix any of it. I just stood there and let the quiet settle. Daniel came over that evening. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just wrapped his arms around me and held me long enough for my body to decide whether it needed to cry. It didn't. "You did what you had to do," he said softly. "I didn't do it out of anger," I told him. "I did it because I finally understood something." "What?" "That love doesn't mean surrender." The next few weeks were business. I cleaned. I repaired the minor damage. I finished the final touches on the renovation without interruption, without commentary, without someone stepping over my boundaries. The master suite felt like it was supposed to again. Quiet, locked, mine. Then I contacted a realtor. The market was strong. The house showed beautifully. All the work I had poured into it, the roof, the floors, the HVAC, the structural repairs, it translated into value. Within weeks, I had an offer that made me pause. It was far more than I had invested. The closing took longer than I expected, but when it cleared, the profit was real, substantial, clean. $300,000. I sat in my truck after the final wire transfer hit my account and stared at my phone. There was a list of names I had spent half my life trying to satisfy. Ronald, Cassandra, Bianca, Aiden. Clover, one by one I blocked them. No dramatic messages, no final speeches. Right before I blocked Ronald, one last text came through. "Vicky, come home, we can fix this." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I blocked him too. Daniel and I drove away from that town 2 days later, not running, just moving forward. "You feel free?" he asked me as we crossed the state line. I looked out the window at the road stretching ahead. "For the first time," I said, "I feel like I'm not carrying anyone. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped carrying it. And sometimes that's the only way to survive.